This is a Montie moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano. Well, it's championship weekend in college football, our last real weekend to really discuss games before we get into bowl season and ultimately the college football playoff semifinals and championship. And we have a lot to catch you up on since we were not on last week during the Thanksgiving week. We did make picks on our social media account, Game on ETB, and we did not do well. We'll get to that in just a moment. But just catching up on all the news in college football in the past week. There have been a flurry of coaching changes in the college football landscape. Huge freeze going to Auburn, leaving Liberty. He was 39-25 in 5 years as the Ole Miss head coach. Followed that up with a 35-15 record at Liberty from 2019 to this year. So he will now take over at Auburn. You had Luke Fickell, who we know from Cincinnati, took him to the semifinals of the college football playoff last year against Alabama, and he's going to Wisconsin. I think that is a home run hire for the Badgers program. They needed a spark. Fickell was 57-18 with the Bearcats, 3 double-digit winning seasons, 2 conference championships, and obviously last year we all know about that magical run into the college football playoff semifinals, and really didn't play that bad against Alabama when you look at it. So he goes to Wisconsin, and then probably one that I think was a match made in heaven was Nebraska getting Matt Rule, the former Carolina Panthers head coach who got fired. We all know Matt Rule was with Baylor before, took that program to winning ways, and he's a program builder. I think it is exactly what Nebraska needed after the horrible run from Scott Frost. So new coaches and coaches in new places, new faces in new places. I think those are 3 very, very good fits for those 3 guys. So that's what's happening in the college football world over the last couple of days in terms of the coaching moves. You look at the second to last college football playoff rankings. You had Georgia remaining number 1, Michigan with their huge win over Ohio State over the weekend, moving up to number 2, TCU up to 3, and USC moving up into the 4 spot. I think that was not really a surprise there when you look at what's been going on there. I think the only thing you were really going to wonder, one of the questions you were going to wonder was Ohio State actually going to fall to 4 or were they going to fall out of it? And they fell to 5, Alabama to 6. That would have been interesting if it was Alabama 5 and Ohio State 6, because then you're looking at the possibility of even Alabama sneaking their way back in. But what that told me is Alabama's done. I mean, we've known this for a while now. There's been that very slim outside shot, and I guess there still is that very slim outside shot if all heck breaks loose over the weekend in the conference championships. I just don't see it happening. Tennessee, we know, is done at 10-2, falling to 7. The unfortunate thing with Henderson Hooker tearing his ACL after what was really a very, very great, successful year for Tennessee, for the Volunteers. Penn State moving up to 8, interesting enough because that's probably going to look at Penn State at 8, Clemson falling to 9, and Kansas State at 10. Now, that's the interesting part, is Kansas State at 10, because you look at the Big 12 championship game between TCU and Kansas State, that's going to give TCU a little bit more respect if they are able to win that championship. And if not, let's say it becomes a very, very close game and they lose by, let's say, 1. Well, you're going to see that it's against a Kansas State squad that was actually 10th in the playoff rankings. Is there a possibility that even TCU could lose the Big 12 championship and still get in? That's going to be all your question marks. It's just, there's 2 things when you look at the playoff rankings as we go into the championship that I think of. Number 1, you're going to have a college football playoff this year with no Alabama and no Clemson. And there was a crazy stat out that I think 20 of the last 32 spots in the college football playoff over the last several years have been either an Ohio State, an Alabama, or a Clemson-filled team. And now you're looking at the possibility that all 3 of those schools may not be in come the end of the year. And just even Alabama and Clemson not being in. Now, I thought Alabama was very vulnerable going into the season, but nevertheless, it's crazy because, you still obviously have Nick Saban, and you still have what would be, to me, the most valuable player in the country in Bryce Young. And it's just crazy to say that. And Young's played great, and it's just crazy because you look at it, you have Bryce Young and you have probably one of the top defensive guys in the country on Alabama. But you look at them this year, that 2 losses, wins against teams that not really that good on the schedule, and also a lot of close games too. So not really blowing anybody out, and they just didn't look like themselves. We know about Clemson, and then that that game to end the season against South Carolina. You give the Gamecocks a lot of credit, but at the same time, DJ Uyunglele, I mean, geez, 8 for 29 of 99 yards. I would make the argument, if you look at it, that I wouldn't even start him in the ACC championship. Now, we know that he's going to start, but maybe does he have a short leash? I think the thing that works for DJ and Clemson is the matchup against North Carolina. We're going to pick that game in just a few minutes. So that's one. Number two, we went into the last couple of weeks of the playoff with the possibility of, 8 teams for 4 spots, and that has whittled its way down. I think we're looking right now at 5 for 4. And if everything works out, I mean, it may just be 4 for 4. We may not have any dramatic things. I think Ohio State, what they're going to need is TCU to get blown out, maybe an upset, maybe a USC loss in there as well, which I think is certainly a possibility. So we will find out. It is very, very interesting. In fact, if you look at a lot of the playoff predictors, they actually still think Ohio State has a better chance to get into the playoff than USC. So we will find out what happens here as we come down the stretch. It is amazing that it's going to be December. It is conference championship weekend. And, here we are, folks. We've been doing this all season. I tell you, the college football season, it goes by faster than any other thing. Faster than the NFL, faster than, any of the other pro major sports, even faster, it feels like, than college basketball. And what makes it great is that every week is important. And not only you winning, but the way you win. And we've seen that this year. The way the teams are winning has made a big, big deal, and we'll find out what happens here as we get into championship weekend. We're gonna pick more than 3 games. If you saw our picks on Game on ETB on Twitter last week, I went with a 5-pack, and maybe I shouldn't have because I went 1 and 4. It was a bad weekend. I know I couldn't do a video just because sometimes real life gets in the way, and that's what's been happening here. But last week we went 1 and 4. The only game that I won with last week was USC against Notre Dame. And, as a Notre Dame fan, I kind of expected that. It's been still a very, very good first year there for Marcus Freeman, considering the turnover that was going to happen. We knew that there was going to be a transition year, but I still think Notre Dame had a pretty good first year under head coach Marcus Freeman. I think the future does look good for them there. But unfortunately, just 1 and 4 last week, and what that's done now is put us under 500 for the year. So we're going to pick, I think I got 5 or 6 games that we're going to pick. I'm going to break down 2, and then we'll just give you a couple quick ones here at the end. Obviously, we're going to pick the 2 championship games that have the most impact in the college football playoff rankings when the final rankings come out on Sunday at noon Eastern there on ESPN. But the first game we're going to go with is on Friday night, the Pac-12 championship game on Fox, a rematch from earlier in the season where the Utah Utes take on the USC Trojans. And the Trojans, they are 3-point favorites. And honestly, I'm starting with chaos here, and I'm taking Utah plus the 3. The USC defense remains poor. I mean, I get Caleb Williams. He's been a stud all season long, Heisman worthy for sure. But I look at this matchup, and Utah, who's given USC their only loss going into this game by 1 point earlier in the season, they have the Pac-12's #1 defense. And this offense can go blow for blow with the Trojans. And I just don't see this being a blowout on either end. So it could even be USC winning, let's say, 32-31. It could be that close. And, I'm getting the 3 points with Utah. Ultimately, if I was doing that, I'd like to get it to 3.5. But we're going to pick it at 3 because that's what it is. And, again, we've seen Utah do this already. I think they could do this again. And I wouldn't be surprised they win this game outright. That's what I'm going with. Utah plus the 3. And if that's the case, the big winners are going to be the Buckeyes, because USC not winning the Pac-12 championship, 2 losses, both to Utah, they're not going to get in. So very, very critical game for them. If Utah wins, knocks USC out, the big winners there are the Ohio State Buckeyes. They will get themselves back in, and I think that's what's going to happen. So and if not, even if USC wins by a point or 2, well, that's good enough for our picks. Utah plus the 3 in the Pac-12 championship on Friday night. Saturday afternoon gets started with the Big 12 championship at 12 Eastern between 10th-ranked Kansas State and TCU, and the third-ranked Horned Frogs. And the Horned Frogs 2.5-point favorites. It seems like this has been the kind of line that TCU has been playing with for weeks now, and the Horned Frogs have pretty much been playing playoff football for a while now. And to me, if you look at TCU the last few weeks, the thing that's been consistent about them has been their defense. They've allowed only just over 17 points per game over their final 3 games. So it doesn't matter if they're going to put up 17, if they put up 24, or they put up 55. I think they have enough to get it done here, and I'm laying less than a field goal. I think, they win this game. They lock themselves into a semifinal. If somehow Kansas State wins by, let's say, a point or 2, I still think TCU has a shot to get into the playoff. You know what? As I said earlier, them being ranked 10th, Kansas State, is actually a good thing for TCU. So they were also one of the winners of the last playoff rankings. But I think TCU has enough to get done. The Horned Frogs have been playing, again, this kind of football for weeks now. I trust their defense in this spot. I think they get it done here and lock themselves into a semifinal. So in game number 2, pick number 2, the Horned Frogs laying 2.5 in the Big 12 championship game. So those are the 2 really most impactful college football playoff championship games of the weekend. So that's what we're going to go with. And then real quick here, I'll scroll through some other ones here. I got a few more picks for you. I like Coastal Carolina getting 8.5 in the Sun Belt Championship against Troy. Troy might win it, but if you look at them, they've had trouble blowing out teams this season, and 4 of their last 6 wins coming by 1 possession. Coastal's been competitive all season long. They've had some great moments as well. I think they could keep it close. I wouldn't even be surprised if they win the Sun Belt outright. But we're going to grab the 8.5 with Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt. SEC Championship, Georgia against LSU. Georgia's laying 17.5 in this one. This is not going to be like the SEC Championship game of last year when Bama shocked the world. Although, really, Bama and shocking the world shouldn't be in the same sentence. Although you look at it this year, Bama not being discussed in the playoff and being out, for weeks, that's the real shock when you look at the history of the playoff. But I like Georgia's defense to me, just, the best in the country. I think it's going to give LSU fits. And it's been a good first year for Brian Kelly, but it's going to end in a bad style here. Georgia to easily win the SEC championship is pick number 4. Game number 5, ACC championship Saturday night, Clemson, North Carolina. A few weeks ago, this looked like it was going to be a fantastic game. Now you have Clemson obviously coming off that loss to the Gamecocks where DJ looked awful, 8 of 29 for 99 yards. You have North Carolina who's come off of 2 bad losses in a row to unranked opponents, including against NC State last Friday where they missed a field goal, what was a chip shot field goal that could have gotten into a third overtime. So it's not really good. I'm not confident in picking in Clemson in this spot. I haven't been confident picking Clemson all season long, but 7.5-point favorites in the ACC championship. I'm going to pick them for one big reason, though. Their defense versus the Tar Heel defense. I think it is a big mismatch. And if, let's say, they were facing a very legitimate defense in North Carolina, maybe we'd see more Cade Klubnik in this one. I think this is a spot that DJ can bounce back. But let's say he struggles in the early going here, and it's very, very close. Does Dabo Swinney pull the trigger here and go to Cade Klubnik? That's something to watch. If this was earlier in the season where Clemson had those 2 losses and DJ looked the way he did, I think they would have made the switch already. I'm actually a little bit surprised that he did not make the switch, Dabo, but I think also at the same time, because of this matchup and because of that porous North Carolina Tar Heel defense, I think this is a spot for DJ to bounce back in, and I think Clemson does get it done. Not going to be enough to get them into the playoff, but will get them an ACC championship and a winner here. So Clemson minus 7.5. And then finally, Saturday night, the Big Ten championship, Michigan, Perdue. This is not a good matchup. Michigan 17-point favorites. They've won by 17 or more in 9 of their games this season, including the biggest one of them all last week at Ohio State. To me, there's going to be the only thing you may be worried about is a letdown here. I don't think there's going to be a letdown. I'd say take the money and bet on the Wolverines laying the 17 in the Big Ten championship game. So 6 picks to wrap up the championship weekend. Utah plus the 3 in the Pac-12. TCU minus 2.5 in the Big 12. Coastal Carolina getting 8.5 in the Sun Belt. Georgia laying 17.5 in the SEC. Clemson minus 7.5 in the ACC. And Michigan in the Big 10 minus the 17. For more, like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB. You could follow me on Twitter at MontalbanoNY. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. Subscribe, ring that notification bell so you know when our content is going to be out. We'll react to the final college football playoff rankings next week. This has been a Monty moment. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. I'm Johnny Montalbano.